Noble Sissle. It was thought that he would be a minister one day like his father, but he was basically a singer.
But there's no forgetting when evening is near. I cry, but there's no regretting. In spite of my tears, oh, the devil was in your
His father, George Sissle, was born in 1852 in Kentucky during slavery. They were all a part of the Sissle plantation, so everybody had that name. When emancipation came, his father became the minister in the group, and they formed a church. His father said, well, I can't have the same name as the whole congregation. And he made up this spelling, S-I-S-S-L-E. Once they realized that he could sing, Noble Sissle, his son, is singing there. And he loved it because he just had this natural voice, but he also was a little showman, too.
Noble Lee Sissle, like a lot of Americans in the late 19th century, was born in a sort of rural situation that was slowly becoming a city. It was on the outskirts of Indianapolis. At the age of about 16 or 17, he moves to Cleveland with his family. It's much more of an urban situation. He goes to a high school where he's one of the few African Americans, tries to join several bands, and he becomes sort of well known around town as a singer and an entertainer.
He goes out there doing the one thing he does well, and that is sing. So he joins a pretty popular quartet that professionally goes all around the Midwest.
He does that thing called loving like no one else can. He's got such a pleasing line.
By this time, he met U.B. Blake. And when he and U.B. got together and changed how you perform, not in that comedy kind of blackface, but tuxedos.
Then he's drawn like a magnet to Harlem. Harlem in the 1910s was really the cultural capital of the country. Many of the great entertainers, many of the great writers, stars of music at the time were all moving to Harlem. And it was safe. It was New York City. Discrimination against African Americans was much lower. But also, it was a place that was 50,000 African Americans living together and middle class. People who had some money, people who were running clubs, people who were running businesses.
Spin around with all your might. Stretch your left arm out and stay. Rocks to style and grace. Put the good way around.
And at some point, he meets James Reese Europe. And James Reese Europe is fast becoming one of the real organizers for music and entertainment in the area.
Once he met Jim Europe, he became more of a business person, keeping the affairs together, getting musicians where they're supposed to go, direct the band a couple times, helping Jim Europe's organization.
When the war broke out in Europe in 1914, the United States was very much a country in transition. Most of the population still lived on ranches and farms, sort of rural and semi-rural situations. It was also a society that had been going through industrialization. More and more, it was becoming a country of big cities and people moving from the ranches to the big cities. It was also a very racially segregated society still. The sense of an American nation was not very strong.
There was a big debate going on between W.B. Du Bois and folks in the NAACP. Why should we fight, considering what we're going through in America? I mean, we're 40-something years from emancipation. W.B. was saying, we need to go. This is a chance to show the world that we are Americans despite all of this. Finally, they got a National Guard unit in Harlem after all kind of fighting to get a unit there. And Jim goes down and signs up to be a machine gunner. Then he goes back to the office and announces to my dad, I just went and signed up. You need to join too, because we need to put this band together, because it's what's after the war I'm looking at.
James Reese Europe convinced Noble Lee Sissle to join the National Guard. And he did so because he saw the National Guard as a place where manhood could be developed. And he wanted young black men to be able to go to a place for developing themselves physically, musically, professionally. They see it as an opportunity. In fact, they immediately start going around trying to recruit others to join the band.
Jim Europe took it one step further. We're going to take our music over there. He says, we need to go to Puerto Rico because there's some fantastic musicians down there. And Jim went down there with my dad and recruited about 17 or 18 Puerto Ricans who came to New York and joined the army to go to the war, to play.
So Noble Lee Sissle and a number of other entertainers are members of the National Guard, and the war breaks out, and the United States joins in 1917.
This is just a band, but they need like 5,000 or 6,000 to make up this regiment. Once they got the full complement of people, they went to South Carolina to train weapons and everything.
So it's in Spartanburg, South Carolina, that Noble Lee Sissle really experiences his first racism as a soldier.
On a Sunday, Jim Europe used to tell my dad, go down to the newspaper stand and buy every paper that's got New York written on it. So my dad went into a newsstand. A gentleman came up behind him and knocked his cap off and said, hey, N-word, don't you know to take your cap off? Then my dad said, but you know, that's Uncle Sam's cap. And the guy said, yeah, but you're not going to put it on.
He's immediately jumped upon and actually beaten quite a bit by a number of the patrons there. And at that point, the other soldiers get really mad. And so a group of soldiers, both African-American and white New York soldiers, decide that they are not going to take this from the people in the town.
Jim Europe, being an officer, saw that. He got in a Jeep, came around and stopped those guys, called them to attention, about face, marched them back. Now, what to do? Well, let's just stop all of this rehearsing and practice. Let's go back to New York. So they get back to New York. What to do with them? They haven't finished their basic training. So then they said, well, let's just put them on a boat right now because the division's not ready, but we got to get them out of here. They put them on a boat, ship called the Pocahontas. It broke down at least twice before it even left the New York harbor, but it made it to France. They said we got literally kicked out of America and went to France early. And when that ship landed, that made the first African American to land in France on New Year's Day, 1918.
They arrive at the port of Saint-Nazaire, but the port isn't big enough. So almost immediately, these African-American soldiers are turned into laborers, helping to enlarge the port. And they actually work there for several months as laborers and later stevedores carrying goods off of the ships that are arriving. But at a certain point then, they're actually turned over from being essentially a labor unit into going towards the front line.
There was no American unit they wanted to put them with. They didn't want to put them to the white units, and there were no other black units. So let's attach them to a French division. But we got to get rid of this 15th National Guard. So they assigned them the number 369.
So they fought in French uniforms, and they fought with French equipment. At that point, the band begins touring all over France, play for dignitaries, for soldiers, officials, prisoners of war. And as they do so, they're immensely popular.
Here's my dad as a vocalist playing with this great band, but putting that sound that they've been playing in New York. The French could not believe the sound they were hearing.
And at certain points then, the band comes back and actually joins the unit on the front lines. When Noble Lee Sissle is at the front, his unit are in trenches. They're being shelled. They're directly facing the Germans across no man's land. They are essentially infantrymen, the real sort of largest, most extensive experience of American military men in the war.
It was the fighting men who raised so much Cain over there, and the Germans say they just won't stop. They're like from hell. So they got this name, the Hellfighters.
The Harlem Hellfighters are well known for several reasons, but one is that they were one of the most successful army units sent over to France. Once they made it to the front line, they were actually extremely successful in defending the sectors they were sent to, and were known for their military prowess. But in addition, they're well known because they brought over an incredible band, and this was the band that James Reese Europe and Noble Sissle helped lead.
He took that sound over there, and that's where the history was made, because Frenchmen never heard this syncopated ragtime, jazz, whatever they call it, never heard it before. They would suggest you're doing something to your horn. There's something, that trumpet, there's something inside, because there's no way you get that sound.
In fact, they are the composers of some of the great songs that really typify the war.
My dad would say, we heard Jim and got gas, and he's back at the hospital. I get into his room, and he's sitting up there writing some lyrics. He said, Sissle, I just got an idea about being on patrol in no man's land. And that's the song that they wrote.
Out in no man's land, there's a bit of a...
What they would do is, Jim played the piano. The band would make the sounds of machine guns, and my dad is singing this song, and he's running across, ducking us, going under barbed wire. He's acting out and singing this song.
There's a bit of a... Come in, look out! Hear that roar, there's one more, and fast.
And that became a very big hit, so the French wanted to see that performance.
With those hand grenades and machine gun, holy spade. Alert, gas, put on your mask, adjust it correctly and hurry up fast. Drop, there's a rocket for the Bosch barrage. Down, hug the ground close you can, don't stand.
And that jazz, that musical and blues legacy really became central to the way that French culture reoriented itself, so that in the 20s and 30s, African-American musicians were incredibly popular in Paris and in France generally. That's really started by this band that James Reese Europe and Noble Sissle helped lead.
Don't fear, all's clear, that's the life of a soul when you take a patrol. Out in no man's land, ain't it grand? Out in no man's land, ain't it grand?
The Harlem Hellfighters were pretty much on the front lines until the end of the war. They came back to New York, and there was an enormous parade for them.
They reversed the direction, started downtown, came up Fifth, then went to Harlem, because that's where the people were that they wanted to impress. They're still wearing basically French uniforms. When they got back, all of their notoriety got to New York before they did. Jim Europe says, we have to follow up on this. So when everybody was out of the Army, they kept uniforms and they went on tour as the 369th Hellfighters, coming to a city near you.
The United States was transformed by World War I in a number of ways. We had really become an industrialized society through this war effort. At the same time, there was a growing sense of an American nation. We had done this together. We'd been in this effort together. But it was also divisive in some ways, because at the end of the war, veterans came back, and there was something of an economic downturn, and questions of class became even more present. And especially also in terms of race. African Americans coming home as soldiers, were they coming home as men who had proven themselves and would now get more rights, or were they coming home and displacing white workers who had taken those jobs while they had been away?
With childhood scenes unfolding, oft times I stand a-holding.
And these culminated in a number of incidents in which white citizens attacked African-American communities, and in some cases, returning soldiers.
From silent meditation, I drift in conversation with my little baby shoes. Then in the hush-a-bye, oh baby ways, we talk about a rock-a-bye.
There were numerous losses, a lot of people killed through these actions.
With little baby shoes.
It was undoubtedly one of the tensest moments in the history of race relations in the United States.
You were the only two pals that I had. When boys would chide me, you'd always guide me safely back home, just a screaming for Dad. Little baby shoes.
So a lot more division, but also a new sense of unity. And these two things kind of push against each other.
And though you're graceless and laceless and tattered and torn.
When Noble Lee Sissle comes back from the war, he settles in Harlem again. It's really his home, and he becomes a really well-known entertainer.
Be good on Sunday, raise up the devil on Monday.
He plays at the Horseshoe Club and the Diamond Club.
The Cotton Club, the Apollo, he played those places.
In fact, for a while there, when he was playing at the Horseshoe Club, he was called the unofficial mayor of Harlem.
Oh, you can't get to heaven, you can't get to heaven that way. If you like me like I like you.
And it's from that that he moved, I think, really into other forms of entertainment.
I left Frisco Cape, swinging on that golden gate. When Kansas City kitty smiled at me.
He put on a play that helped trigger the Harlem Renaissance. When Shuffle Along made it on Broadway, that brought African Americans back to legitimate theater, because before that it was just minstrel. When that play got their success, within a year there were 9 other African American plays. Shuffle Along, to me, was the true beginning of his legacy. Shuffle Along in 1921 started the Harlem Renaissance. So between the 30s until the big band era ends in the 50s, he is Noble Sissle, international orchestra leader.
Got the bench, got the park, got a nook, nice and dark, got 'em all, but I haven't got you, baby. Got a cute bungalow where the red roses grow.
When Martin Luther King won the Nobel Peace Prize, they had the big reception at the 369th Armory. I remember meeting Martin Luther King because I was like standing next to my dad when he came by. My dad always just spoke so much of it, but I'm living in the South and I'm seeing all of these conditions. My dad knows about it, but he lives in New York and they're in a whole nother world. They know how African Americans are being treated, but they don't know the day-to-day things that just happen because you're black. My dad's era, people would say, so what? They've been doing like that for years. We need to keep going. It's down there. You know, New Yorkers say, it's down there. Dr. King would address these things. He said, no, we're going to fight for this. So he goes to protest, he goes to jail and everything. When he gets assassinated, that changes everything. For 30 years, my dad was president of the Negro Actors Guild in New York. And their mission was to get African Americans into jobs, Broadway, TV, whatever. So he was on the front line trying to open those doors. People like Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, they were all young guys coming through.
And And I think that kind of typifies in many ways the role that he played in the civil rights struggle. It was about making sure there wasn't discrimination against African Americans on screen and in music.
He didn't talk about it. I did this, he never talked that way. It was like we were able to do this, we do that.
Nobly, Sissle represents three really important transformations that he personally participated in American society. He represents tens and hundreds of thousands of African Americans who joined this first major overseas war effort for the United States. And in that role, he also sort of exemplifies this beginning of a struggle for equality, really being empowered by veterans and veterans playing a role in that struggle. But finally, he has this really important legacy, along with the band and his friend James Reese Europe, of bringing jazz and blues and significantly transforming French culture and European culture for decades and centuries to come.
Every time I've seen his band play, he has a male singer and a female singer. My dad would start the band off, and then he's circulating the facility all night long, and he's socializing with everyone. Then he gets on stage, and he does his shuffle-along medley, and that's what they're waiting for, because it all ends with, "I'm just wild about Harry," and everybody's singing along.
I'm just wild about Harry.
There's just one fellow for me in this world. Harry's his name, that's what I claim. For every fellow there must be a girl, and I found my mate by goodness of fate. And I'm just wild about Harry. Harry's wild about me. The heavenly glimpses of his kisses fill me with ecstasy. He's sweet like chocolate candy, sweeter than that honey from the bee. That's why I'm just wild about Harry, and Harry's wild about, can I do without Harry's wild about.
Look out, I'm gone now, gone.
Go ahead. Oh.
We'll all be ready when the great day comes and the saints come marching in. Well, this is Noble Sissle signing off. I'd like to give credit to my son, Noble Sissle Jr., who is my assistant in putting this story together.
I'll be ready.